Hello GMAT aspirants, welcome back to another episode of GMAT Friday with IMS International. I hope your GMAT preparation is on track and you are on the way to score that 655 score. Here's the question of the week. Pause the video, give it a shot and then resume to look at the solution. Alright, so this looks like a very scary question to be honest. Let's try and understand what are we supposed to do. So this is a question of data sufficiency which I hope you all were able to figure out. Let's see what needs to be done. So an estimate of an actual data value has an error of p% if p is equal to 100 times mod of e minus a over a, where e is the estimated value and a is the actual value. Now most of the GMAT aspirants get scared just by reading this particular statement. What is this? This is nothing but talking about percentage change. It's just that they have given the entire definition of percentage change in words rather than expecting you to know by default what's the meaning of percentage change, right? So for example, if there's a value 20 and that changes to 30, what is the percentage change? The value increased by 10, it increased by 10 over 20, and to convert that into percentage we multiply by 100. So that is nothing but what? 1 by 2, which is 50%. I mean, this is what is given over here. It's just that in our case, we have taken a pre-value and a post-value and we have tried to understand what's the percentage change. Over here, they have given that, okay, there's an estimated value and there's an actual value and you need to find out what's the error in that. And I think so for exactly that reason, they have introduced the sign of modulus as well. That whatever change is happening is not going to have any sign. I mean, you can have a 10% change in the positive direction, you can have a change of 10% in the negative direction as well. So I think so for that reason, they have mentioned the modulus sign. But so far, it doesn't sound very scary. But many GMAT aspirants do feel a lot of pressure while reading the very first statement. There was nothing to be afraid of in that line. Alright, moving ahead. Now, Emma's estimate for her total income last year had an error of less than 20%. Okay, so now that concept of percentage error has been given to us in terms of Emma's income, right? So Emma made an estimate and that estimate for her total income was having an error of 20%. In fact, that error was less than 20%. So for example, if Emma was earning, let's say, $100, what was the error that she made? She made an error of 20%. But remember this modulus sign. That error of 20% could have been in any of the directions, right? So either her actual income, if it was 100, she made an estimate that, okay, I would be making 120 or I would be making 80. So her estimate was that I would be making somewhere between 80 and 120, whereas in reality, she had an income of 100. And that is why she was making an error of 20% in her judgment. All right, moving ahead. Emma's estimate of her income from tutoring last year also had an error of less than 20%. Okay, so now whatever was her total income, of that total income, there was a component which she was getting from tutoring, right? Even in that income, she was making an error of 20%. So the same example seems fit over here as well, that assuming that she was earning $100 from tutoring, her actual income was 100 from tutoring, but she made an estimate of 80 to 120. Now I know this sounds very confusing and therefore as a GMAT aspirant, it is expected of you to write something on the piece of paper so that you do not get confused, right? We would be doing that in the next slide. Right now, we are just trying to understand what the data set is talking about. All right. Was Emma's actual income from tutoring last year at most, okay, this is one very important word, at most, which basically talks about range, right? So was Emma's actual income from tutoring last year at most 45% of her actual total income last year? There are a lot of parameters involved in this question, right? So we will have to read this very, very carefully and break down every single word present in the question, right? So this is the question that we need to answer. Now, is my name Anirudh? What's the answer? It's either going to be a yes or a no. Similarly, if I look at this question, the answer that the paper setter is expecting of us is either a yes or a no. So yes, she was earning at most 45%. No, she wasn't earning at most 45%. So that is what the paper setter is expecting us to do. And in order to solve that, the paper setter has given us two statements. Now, statement 1 is telling something and statement 2 is telling something. We would be using both the statements individually, right? And based on that, we need to figure out whether we would be able to answer the question or not. And I think so everybody is aware about that is what data sufficiency is all about, right? All right, so let's write all the data that we have understood. So there are two components. One is the total income that she is earning, and one is the income that she is earning from tutoring. And in both of these components, there are two further components. One is the actual that she is earning, and the other one is the estimate that she had made. And if you look at the data again carefully, you will see that her estimate had an error of 20% with respect to the actual value, right? So, if she was earning $100 in reality, her estimate was somewhere between 80 and 120. Please note that 80 and 120 are not acceptable values because she was making an error of less than 20%, right? So any number between 80 and 120 could have been her estimate if she was earning $100 in reality. All right. Now, let me give you a different perspective of looking at this 20%. Let's say you go to a shop and you see a beautiful product costing $200 and there's a discount of, let's say, 30% available. How much would you end up paying? One easier way of calculating is obviously calculate 30% of 200. That is what? $60. And you subtract that and you get 140. That's one way of calculating. The other way of calculating and a quicker way of calculating would be that since I am getting a 30% discount, I am only ending up paying 70% of the total price. So 70% of 200 would be how much? 140. So that saves some calculation time for me, right? And that would obviously be very helpful in the longer run. So the same thing we are going to be trying to using over here, right? So whatever was her actual income, she was making an error of 20%. That means her estimate was somewhere between 80 to 120% of whatever was her actual income, right? So this 80% could be written as 4 by 5 and this 120% could be written as 6 by 5. I am assuming that your concept of percentages and fractions are in place. All right. Now, so her estimated income was either 4/5 or 6/5 of her actual income or somewhere between them. All right. Same thing was happening for her tutoring component as well. I am not writing that over here. All right. Now let's look at the statements given to us. We'll start with statement 1. Statement 1 tells Emma's estimated income last year from tutoring was 30% of her estimated total income last year. All right. So now there's a relation given to us between what? Her estimated actual income and her estimated total estimated tutoring income, right? That is what the relation is given to us. All right. Can I say that if I get to know what was her estimated total income last year, just based on statement 1, if I get to know what was her estimated total income last year, I can easily calculate 30% of that and comment on what would be her estimated income from tutoring, right? So we'll start with that. Now, please look at this very, very carefully. There's a relation given to us between the estimates. And based on that, we need to calculate the actual. Because look at the question once again. What was asked to us? Was Emma's actual income from tutoring last year at most 45% of her actual total income? So there are, as we discussed, there are a lot of parameters involved. So from statement 1, we need to calculate the estimated values. From those estimated values, we need to calculate the total values. And from those total values, we need to check whether this thing is happening or not. All right, so complicated. Moving ahead. Now, I'll just change the color of the ink so that we get to know that whatever we are writing with this blue ink is based on statement 1. It's given to us that whatever was her total income estimated, 30% of that was coming from tutoring, right? So let's assume that she was earning $100 in total. So what would be her estimated income from tutoring? That would be 30, right? From this 100, can I calculate what was her total income? From this 30, can I calculate what was her actual tutoring income? Yes, we can. Obviously, we won't be able to comment on the exact value. We would be able to comment only on the ranges. But let's try and do that. And there might be a case where we might have to refine the example. We might have to refine the numbers that we had taken. All right. Let's go for this relation once again. So I know that whatever was her estimate is either 4/5 of her actual or somewhere between 4/5 of the actual and 6/5 of the actual. So can I comment on the actual value? Yes, I can. Her actual income would be either 5/4 of the estimate or 5/6 of the estimate. So if I want to go from the estimated value to the actual value, I need to either calculate 5/4 or 5/6 of that estimated value, and I would be able to comment on the actual value, right? Now please understand, what was the estimate that we assumed? We assumed it to be 100, right? Now calculating 5/4 of 100 is not going to be a difficult task, but 5/6 of 100 is going to give me some fractions, which leads me to believe that taking 100 as the total estimate was not a very smart choice, right? And this is something that throughout your GMAT journey you will understand that it is not always smart thing to assume the value to be 100. There are some cases where you might have to assume a different value. So I should take a value that could easily be cancelled by either 4 or 6, right? So we can probably take 120, right? Why 120? Because it ends in a 0 and 12 is the LCM of 4 and 6. So therefore taking 120 might be in our best interest. So I'll clear off some part of the screen, just a minute. And whatever I had written in blue, I will be erasing that. All right. So the relation that we have established is that the estimated value is 4/5 of actual, and therefore the actual value would be 5/4 of the estimate to 5/6 of the estimate, and I am assuming that the estimated value is 120. Now if this is 120, this value would also change because 30% of 100 is 30, but 30% of 120 would be 36. So this is changed to 36. So now what is our new assumption? That her estimated total income was 120 and her estimated income was 36. How were we able to calculate that? Because right now we are using statement 1. Alright. Now if her estimate is 120, what would be her actual? Either 5/4 of 120. Now what is 5/4 of 120? That is nothing but 150. And what would be 5/6 of 120? That would be what? 100. So this tells me that her actual income was somewhere between 100 and 150. That is when she had the liberty of making an error of 20%. I know that we are considering 20% as well, but we are just taking the extreme limit as of now, right? So with 100 and 150, any number in between, she does have the liberty of making an error of 20% in her estimate. Because please read the question very carefully. The relation is given to you in terms of the estimates, where that was a percentage of the actuals. All right, moving ahead. Now, if her estimated income from tutoring was 36, what could have been her actual income? We will again use this same logic because she made an error of 20% in both the cases, right? So 5/4 of her estimate would be what? This would be 45, and 5/6 of 36 would be how much? 30. So therefore, her actual income from tutoring was somewhere between 30 and 45. That gives her the liberty of making an error of 20% in any of the direction, landing up at 36. I hope this part is clear. Alright, now let's look at the question again. Was Emma's actual income from tutoring last year at most? What do we mean by at most? The maximum possible value, right? So was Emma's actual income from tutoring last year at most 45% of her actual total income last year? So what are the two components that we need? The first component would be her actual tutoring fee or the tutoring income over her actual total income, and we multiply it with 100 to convert that into percentage. I mean, this is what has been asked to us, and they are asking whether this value is at most 45% or not. Okay, now let's again try to understand the concept of maximizing something. If I want the value to be maximum, what should be the numerator and denominator of the fraction? My numerator should be as high as possible and my denominator should be as low as possible, right? So let's see, what was the range of her actual tutoring fee? Somewhere between 30 and 45. So what's the maximum that she could have earned? 45. And I want my denominator to be as low as possible. So I would be looking at the total actual money that she is earning. And what is the least that she could earn? $100. So therefore my denominator would be 100, and to convert that into percentage we multiply by 100, and therefore I do get 45%, right? So therefore at most, in the best possible case, she would be ending up making 45% of her total actual income as her tutoring actual income. I know the actual and estimate might sound a bit confusing, but please look at this video again so that this concept is clear to you. So if I just use statement 1 alone, I am able to come up with an answer. Now, one fun thing, you actually didn't have to do this entire calculation. I mean, once you got to know that there is going to be a range in both the cases, and once you got to know that this is what we need to calculate, no matter what happens, you would be getting a value. Now that is either going to be more than 45% or equal to 45% or less than 45%. In any which case, you would be able to answer this yes or no question. So I could have probably saved some time by actually not doing this calculation, right? But again, it is not always possible to know everything during the examination. So if you do this calculation, that's absolutely okay, right? So statement 1 alone was sufficient to answer the question as of now. Now, I hope you know that there are 5 options, option A, B, C, D, E. And I hope you know which option stands for what. So I can easily eliminate option B, I can easily eliminate option C, and I can easily eliminate option E. Now I need to check whether statement 2 alone would be sufficient to answer the question or not. So what does statement 2 tells? Emma's estimated total income last year was $40,000. Okay. Now I know that what was her total income's estimate last year. Based on this, what's the best that we can do? If I know that the total estimate income was $40,000, the best thing that I can comment on is the range of the actual income. We will again do that calculation of 5/4 and 5/4 and 5/6 of the estimate, right? And that's the best that I can do, that what is her total income's range. But do I get to know anything about the tutoring component from the second statement? I don't, right? So if I just use the second statement alone, there is no way I would be able to comment on her tutoring component. And since I won't be able to comment on that, I won't be able to understand what's the numerator going to be. And since I won't be able to do that, my answer could be both a yes or a no. And therefore, statement 2 alone was not sufficient to answer this question, right? And therefore, option D is also eliminated and option A becomes your correct answer. This was a tough question. and I don't expect everybody to encounter such kind of questions in the examination unless they are doing fantastically well, right? This, in my opinion, was definitely a 765 plus question. So I hope you were able to understand this a bit challenging and a bit confusing question. Do let us know in the comment box if you have any queries. If you like this video, if you like this content, please like this and subscribe to our channel for more such insights.